All right. Well, good morning. I'm Ashley McConnell, and I am here with one of my favorite botanists, Christy Scarrazzo with the Ventura Fish and Wildlife Office. Thank you so much, Christy, for taking some time out this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with you.
So we are going to be talking today about a rare plant and a recovery plan that has been produced by the Fish and Wildlife Service and partners. And this little plant, tell me about it. It's called the La Graciosa Thistle. What makes this plant unique and where does it live?
Yes, absolutely. So La Graciosa Thistle is Cirsium scariosum variety loncholepis, and it's a very local, narrow endemic. And the plant itself is very enigmatic, but because it requires coastal dune wetland habitats. And that's kind of an oxymoron because when we think of coastal dunes, we don't automatically think of wetlands, let alone freshwater wetlands. So this plant is somewhat of an ephemeral species because it comes in with the high water flows, and then it occurs where that high water mark is after the water recedes. So you'll find it in dune slack ponds and also within the floodplain along the Santa Maria River.
So tell me, Christy, it makes sense, right? You don't think of a wetland plant being amongst dunes. This sounds like a really special and unique place. Can you tell me a little bit more about why this particular plant and this in the area that it's in, why is it in trouble?
I can. So the Guadalupe-Nipomo Dunes complex is one of the largest extant dunes on the West Coast. And this plant is primarily threatened from groundwater declines. The Santa Maria groundwater basin has been adjudicated because there's a lot of different land uses in that region. It's a very fertile agricultural valley and it has a long history of agriculture. And it's also some of the most expensive real estate in the southwestern portion of San Luis Obispo and northern Santa Barbara counties. So the combined effects of groundwater use, there's no other source besides the groundwater for all these different land uses. So you have the residential and urban development, and you have also the agriculture of that region. And over time, the groundwater has just been declining. So that's the primary threat to the species. And then in unison with the effects of climate change, which is exacerbating the situation. So there's just essentially not enough water to go around. So a lot of the ponds and the features that support La Graciosa thistle are drying up.
Well, and certainly as those drought conditions potentially worsen, it does sound like there could be an uphill battle for this plant, and others like it that have similar situations. Could you tell me what can be done? What are you working on? What are your partners working on to try to give this species a chance and bring it back from the brink of extinction?
Well, in collaboration with a variety of different partners, we've sort of outlined a strategy for recovery of this plant. And as you may imagine, we can't change the weather, but what we can do is try to maximize the hydrologic function of the features that remain. So a couple things that we're doing is we've started a conservation seed bank. And that is where we've collected a small amount of the seed from the extant occurrences. And those serve as a backup seed source in the event of catastrophic loss. So for example, say all of a sudden there was some stochastic event and we lost all the occurrences, we have a seed reserve where we can then propagate those seeds and reintroduce the plant back out into suitable habitat. A couple of the other things that we're doing is treating invasive weeds One of the biggest other threats besides the groundwater decline is a plant called perennial veld grass. It's Ehrharta calycina, and that plant stabilizes the dunes prematurely. So you really do have to have these aeolian, which are wind-driven movements of sand to scoop out the little dune ponds. And the veld grass is stabilizing those dunes, so we're not getting that sand movement. So we're trying to remove and abate the veld grass from the suitable habitat. The other things that we're doing is propagating that plant and then outplanting it. And then we're also looking at using some engineering to recontour these dune ponds to sort of maximize the hydrologic function. So we want to sort of make sure that, we have the maximum depth, and that any overgrown hydrophytic vegetation, which also sucks up the water, we're kind of removing that as well. And it's been fairly effective.
Well, and Christy, it does sound like there's a lot of activities, a lot of buzz around this plant and the partners that are jumping on board. It sounds like it takes a village for the recovery of some of our, endangered endemic species. So definitely a shout out to a lot of our partners who have been helping us on this. What do you see? What do you see as the forecast for when you think about the future of La Graciosa thistle with some of these partners that are coming to bat?
Well, I'm very optimistic because I feel like it's a highly dynamic and innovative team. We have, to kind of run through the list, partners at the California State Parks. There's occurrences at the Oceano Dunes State Vehicular Recreation Area. We have a refuge that also supports the species, so that's managed and funded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. There's a private landowner called the Dune Lakes Unlimited, and that's actually a duck hunting club. And they're also very committed to recovery of La Graciosa thistle. In addition, the California Native Plant Society, the Coastal Resource Conservation District, and also the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County. And in addition to that, we've also collaborated closely with Cal Poly. And so we have, the academic piece as well. So I feel like there is just a super dynamic team, and everyone is really committed to recovery of this species.
Well, and it's my understanding that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service just within the past week or so released a recovery plan for La Graciosa thistle. Can you tell me about what that plan is all about?
Sure. We formed a recovery team with the entities that I just mentioned. And through that team, we were able to discuss and then ultimately identify a strategic plan of action. And so that is almost like a blueprint or a map, of the actions and endeavors that we could take strategically to sort of move the needle and reverse the declining trajectory. And one of the things that's so great about having a recovery plan is that it provides an opportunity to then be able to leverage funding. So we can say, oh, look, this is identified in the recovery plan. Therefore, we're able to obtain funding to do those actions.
Fantastic, fantastic. And tell me about, I see you've got a picture of the plant right behind you. Can you describe it for me?
Sure. One of the very kind of iconic things about this plant, it has these little sinuses in the leaves, and they do very much remind me of sort of like a ballet folklorico skirt, or when you see, the Mexican dancers. And that's actually one of the characters that I use to identify it in the field, because it does occur with other thistles. And so before the flowers are out, it can be very hard to identify. The other thing about it is it's extremely spiny and robust. You can't exactly walk through a big colony of it without getting poked. And it's actually special to me because this is one of the first plants that I worked with when I came to the service. And it's named after a historic railroad station that's no longer there. So it really does capture some of the history and, some of the attributes of that area.
Well, and it sounds like it is a really remarkable and beautiful and unique part of the world. So we're very lucky to have that along the Central California coast. Christy, is there anything else that you want people to know about La Graciosa Thistle, about the Guadalupe-Nipomo Dunes area, and conservation efforts?
Well, I think one of the things that's important and is sometimes difficult for people to understand is why do we want to conserve some of these local regional endemics? And the answer that I often like to provide is that there are these specialized species, they're highly specialized, but they're also indicators of ecosystem health. And if we look to a plant like this, who is so specialized, if it's doing well, then we know that the ecosystem processes that support the habitat and also the plant are also functioning. So I think that's one of the primary reasons. The other thing that I like to address is that recovering endangered species and different land uses are not mutually exclusive. We can do all of this together strategically. La Graciosa thistle now is restricted to only 8 locations. And so we're not saying, oh, stop the agriculture or stop the, recreation and golfing and that sort of thing. It's like, oh, let's focus our efforts and concentrate them into the places that are remaining. And it's not mutually exclusive. We can do recovery and support these other land uses.
And that's a common sentiment too that we hear often when we talk about endangered species and we talk about development and the needs of people and public recreation and opportunities to grow food. And these are all key important parts of what makes California so special and what makes California what it is. And so being able to preserve and conserve and target conservation in some of these areas, while also promoting and supporting the economies that local communities are reliant upon, like agriculture, like public recreation in these beautiful parts of the world. So, Christy, thank you for the work that you're doing on this, and all of your partners have contributed to the recovery plan itself. And the work that you're doing is really something that is hopefully going to be able to keep plants like these and landscapes like these around for years and generations to come. So, Christy, thank you as always. It's a pleasure to learn more about La Graciosa thistle.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.